If you can, I recommend listening to Sweet Honey and the Rock's song, Will You Harbor Me, as the beginning of this particular sermon. The texts are Amos 7, verses 7 through 17, Psalm 82, Luke 10, verses 25 through 37. Sweet Honey and the Rock is known for its music that addresses issues of social justice. From racism to sexism, from the treatment of laborers to the place of women, yearning for peace and naming oppression and exploitation, these voices pull from the Christian tradition to sing the prophet song. The close harmonies, the dissonance of Will You Harbor Me, tell us of the deep dissonance of our world that insists on knowing just who our neighbor is and on building barriers to concern rather than opening our hearts to the ways of God. Amos is the social justice prophet. God calls this herdsman and dresser of sycamore trees away from his ordinary work to see what others cannot see during this time of prosperity and peace. God calls Amos to be the unbridled conscience of a king whose reign has been a long and good one. God calls Amos to be the holy voice with courage enough to address the moral and spiritual condition of the nation. Although the reading for today does not provide us with any of the particular issues Amos addressed in his oracles, we are privy to one of the visions God gives him. God stands next to a wall holding a plumb line. Once the wall had been built with care, the stones set carefully one on top of the other so that edges aligned and that the layers were level. The wall was sturdy. The builder used the plumb line to make certain the work was done well. Now, though, the wall has begun to waver. The stones are misaligned and no longer true. The wall, the nation, is weakened and on the point of collapse. The wall, the nation, has come to depend on religious practices and ceremonies as evidence for life with God and has fallen short. The nation, in its prosperity, has forgotten that social righteousness, which includes justice for the poor and the oppressed, were central to its life with God. The nation has lost its heart, the heart of God. The psalmist describes what it takes to turn things around. Speaking to a divine council consisting of lesser gods or perhaps even human beings, God demands, "Give justice to the weak and the orphan. Maintain the right of the lowly and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked." The heart of God is with those who most need God's love. In his book, Streams of Living Water, Richard J. Foster describes 6 traditions of Christian life. The social justice tradition, which is a compassionate life, is one of these. Beginning with Jesus, moving through the first deacons of the church who were charged with the just distribution of food, carried through people like Vincent de Paul, John Woolman, William Wilberforce, Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, Harriet Tubman, Albert Schweitzer, Dorothy Day, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and Desmond Tutu, this tradition of social justice and the compassionate way of living addresses the gospel imperative for equity and magnanimity among all people. According to Foster, the fullness of a compassionate life consists of 3 things: mishpat, hesed, and shalom. These 3 Hebrew words describe the complexity of living in the heart of God. Mishpat describes justice and righteousness and includes actions of equitable sharing. Hesed incorporates compassion, loving kindness, and steadfast love, which are all attributes of God. Shalom describes peace and something deeper than peace that incorporates wholeness and healing. As we follow in the social justice tradition, we are called to exhibit and work for mishpat, hesed, and shalom, justice and righteousness, compassionate and loving kindness, and the wholeness and healing of peace. Foster also describes three arenas through which we live this tradition of social justice and live compassionately. This life begins in the personal arena. You perhaps remember the 7 deadly sins: pride, envy, anger, sloth, greed, gluttony, and lust. Our compassionate life and the way of social justice begin as we stand against these things in ourselves. We begin the life of social justice by purging what Foster calls the self-sins: self-promotion, self-pity, self-sufficiency, self-righteousness, self-worship, anything that puts us at the center of life rather than God. As we come around to God's way, we embrace faith, hope, and love. We become who we say we are. Our actions match our word. The practice of prayer brings us back to the heart of God. The next arena in which to bring the tradition of social justice is the social, where relationships are paramount. These relationships include family, friends, neighbors, and work. It is here where we feed the hungry, help the helpless, reach out to the outcast, and lobby for the acceptance of all. Through the social arena, we look for the relationships and networks that are needed for the health and welfare of the community. The heart of God is expressed in Christian community because this particular community can be a place of love and acceptance, freedom and liberation, hope and vision, nurture and accountability. Through our relationships with one another and with those around us, we live near the heart of God. The third area described by Foster is that of institutional structures, the laws and systems that govern and structure our society. The way of the compassionate life gives us the courage to speak against the isms that divide us against one another, giving strength to divisions and boundaries that humans create. Racism, ageism, ableism, sexism, classism, heterosexism, the isms that make it possible for some to claim to be better than others. The social justice tradition allows us to envision and work to bring about a society where it is easier to do good and harder to do evil. It is through institutional structures that we work to enact changes and to respond to human need. The compassionate life, addressing institutional structures, calls for prophetic witness. Prophetic witness brings us to demonstrations with handcrafted signs and newly learned slogans and marching songs. Prophetic witness brings us to our pens and our keyboards to write with passion to legislators and news media. Prophetic witness reveals the moral and spiritual conditions around us, in the cities, in the nation, and in the world. Prophetic witness warns of the consequences of injustice, even as it works for justice. There are some perils to the compassionate life within the tradition of social justice. We can become so focused on caring for the social needs that we lose track of the spirit within us that stirred us to action in the first place. We can become so focused on working to make a difference that the work becomes duty and drudgery rather than spiritual joy. In our efforts to create a just society and an accountable community, we risk becoming rules-bound. For Christians, social justice concerns must always be rooted in profound spiritual realities. The social justice tradition is one of action, and it is critical that we remember why it is we act. Christ's Spirit resides in us, and that same Spirit acts through us. Which brings us to a story about a lawyer, one who studied the Torah, the law, and about Jesus. Scholars disagree over the reason the man tested Jesus. Some say he spoke in the spirit of rabbinic debate, wanting to find out if Jesus was the teacher the lawyer needed. Some say the lawyer was trying to find the weakness in this untutored man. First, he asks about the heart of the law. What is it that holds everything else together? Love, Jesus answers. Loving God and loving neighbor. That is the heart of everything. The lawyer's not persuaded, or he hasn't managed to throw Jesus off yet, so he asks for clarification. Just who is my neighbor? Anyone knows that our neighbors are those most like us, the ones who share our background, our religion, our values, our outlook. The lawyer expected to hear, wanted to hear, that neighbor meant other Jews. The lawyer didn't ask how to show his love of God and neighbor. He asked, who is his neighbor? And then Jesus tells a story about a priest and a Levite and, wait, not an ordinary Jew, a Samaritan. And as Jesus does, he turns everything upside down, telling a story about compassion and what social justice looks like. For so long, this story has been told to us as the parable of the Good Samaritan that we are caught in the moral quality of good. Good does not adequately describe the action of the Samaritan who was passing by and saw a stranger in need and reacted to him with love and treated him with kindness and mercy. This is the story of the compassionate Samaritan, the merciful traveler, the loving Samaritan, the kind traveler. In these few words, Jesus redefines neighbor to be the person near us, the person in need. Jesus tore down the walls, the boundaries that defined who was required to help whom, and revealed the heart of God. Matthew Skinner wrote, "The lawyer wants to define who deserves his love, but Jesus' parable suggests that love seeks out neighbors to receive compassion and care, even when established boundaries or prejudices conspire against it." The man in the ditch didn't ask who it was who stopped to help him. Would you harbor me? The stranger blocking the sun from his eyes, pouring oil and wine on his battered body, provided a measure of comfort and safety. Religion or race, it didn't matter. Was it a woman or a poet or a king? Only the love pouring over him mattered. The stranger passing by on the road didn't stop to wonder about the one in need. It could have been a fugitive or a spy. The traveler could help, could bundle the beaten body onto his mule and travel to the relative safety of an inn. For that moment, the traveler on the road saw as God sees, saw a beloved child in need, and acted with compassion that was not bound by rules and history. Would you harbor me? Would I harbor you?